Dr. Silbergeld, as you know, it's been important to protect personal information of individuals participating in epidemiological studies, and that there's a strict code of ethics among researchers as it relates to human subjects. As I understand it, researchers such as yourself are working on ways to disclose data from human studies so that individuals are protected, but that others can use the data. However, in one of your articles, you indicate that there are studies where the removal of all identifying data negates the scientific value of the data set. Can you elaborate on this statement and instances where the identifying data are necessary to the science? And also, can you discuss the importance of protecting the privacy of study participants and concerns that may arise if the potential study participants fear that their information will be exposed to the general public?
Thank you for that question. The clearest example and of greatest relevance to the subject of this committee's hearing has to do with studies in which we are interested in the location of the subjects. And we have very sophisticated methods of determining this through spatial statistics, the use of GPS and other data. Those data have to be absolutely protected, because if those data become available, people can pretty much identify who participates in the studies, and I've conducted several studies in which we collected those data. That information has to be completely de-identified, which then, of course, means that no one else can exactly take those data and carry out the same analyses. I just want to reiterate that that, to me as a scientist, is an uninteresting approach to science and unlikely to advance our confidence in the results of a specific study. What advances my confidence and should advance the confidence of everyone in this room in the results from one study is really what Dr. Cox alluded to, is whether or not the study can be replicated independently, not whether obtaining the data from the first study can be reanalyzed. That's relatively, frankly, trivial. And in fact, the data that are now being called upon by journals and the NIH will allow one to determine whether protocols are appropriate and statistical models were appropriately selected and study design could meet the requirements of hypothesis testing. I also agree that there should be adequate funding given to public and private sector entities so that we can have the updated scientific findings that we all agree are important to us.
But would you say that there are instances where the identifying data set, that those are very limited instances of research versus other kinds of research where, you can have tons of data that it would be, where it would be important to keep all of the data set available so that you could, perhaps there could be an exclusion or some kind of waiver or something that isn't the rule for more specialized identifying data sets where people's personal information is identifiable?
I would have to say, from my experience, and as someone who routinely goes through the rigors of obtaining approval from our institutional review board, I cannot see that I cannot ethically accept revealing information that would allow personal identification. I think that the most sophisticated approach to answering your questions and these difficult issues, in addition to what Dr. Graham alluded to, is really what's going on worldwide, probably first in the European Union because they're confronting it first, but we are looking at it now, and that is looking at data from clinical trials. How do we get those data out there to restore the faith that has been pretty badly damaged by drug approval processes around the world and inadequate clinical trials, but yet protect the identification of the persons who participate? And I think that's going to be a path forward that will be very informative for all of us.
Thank you. And I just have one question as my time is set to expire. Can you explain or describe, rather, what happens when, as Dr. Graham has said, the scientific culture at EPA is fragile and still in an early stage of development, and that the political, legal, and engineering cultures are stronger and more certain than the culture of science and economics? You're the only scientist on this panel and someone who's worked on several expert groups convened by EPA. Do you want to comment on that position?
Thank you. I would like to defend the reputation and international standing of the EPA's scientific staff. They are widely recognized as among the best in the world. I even share the honor of a MacArthur Fellowship with a former EPA scientist. And while I'm trained in engineering, and I will accept his compliment, I think that the biological, ecological, and human health science at the EPA is extraordinary.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.